So let's bring in our panel to break it all down. Ford O'Connell is the chairman of Civic Forum PAC. Craig Verhoeven is the president and founder of Patriot Majority. Gentlemen, I saw your reaction during that interview. So Ford, I want to start with you. We heard the mayor bring up a couple points, and specifically I want to start our conversation with sanctuary cities before we get into some other topics. He had said, and my quotes aren't exactly, but that the sanctuary cities, if that status was taken away from some of these cities, it would push people back into the shadows. It wouldn't necessarily in any way improve relations with law enforcement and people in the city. Agree or disagree?
Disagree. Let me translate what Mitch Landrieu, the mayor of New Orleans, is saying. I'm not going to comply with federal immigration law for political reasons and because of the ballot box and because of a minority city where if I start deporting people, people are not going to turn out to vote for me. We all know the reason why they're in the shadows, and that is because sanctuary cities provide a magnet and incentive for illegal immigration. So until you cut off the incentive, this is going to continue to happen. And all he's doing is just dodging the question by saying there's all these other things we can do. But the core fact is it is a magnet for illegal immigration because of the welfare state in many of these major cities. You got to understand, we got 300 of these across the nation, and the bottom line is the mayors don't care about enforcing the law. They care about their political survival.
But Craig, first of all, I want you to respond. And he also said, listen, it's our job is to enforce the law. Our job is not to do the Fed's job.
Right. I mean, that's correct. And I have to disagree with a lot of what, Ford just said. I mean, Mitch Landrieu made a very good point. One, sanctuary cities is not a legal identification, and it really doesn't mean much of anything. The second thing is that anybody who's worked closely with mayors and worked closely with police departments know that police departments are the front line in terms of keeping the city safe. Yeah, and if you turn them into a deportation force, the way that Mayor Landrieu was warning against doing, they're not going to be able to do their jobs. Whether it's enforcing the traffic laws or investigating burglaries or investigating murders. So I mean, it's like regardless of what you think about President Trump's orders or his executive decisions that he's making this time, I mean that is not a good use of local police forces, and it's going to create a tremendous hardship on cities. And I think that
get rid of the incentive. Hold on, let
me finish, and we can go back and forth. The issue is that if you turn the city, if you take the cities and make them principally responsible for enforcing an executive order, when a term sanctuary cities, which may mean something politically to some people, but legally it's meaningless. When you then say that you're going to penalize cities in terms of, whether it's grants, for traffic control or whether it's grants for police departments, that will create havoc everywhere.
Well, was it penalizing these cities, or was it just because they wouldn't be enforcing the law that's already there?
They're not enforcing the law that's already there. They choose to ignore said law. And we know this because we look at just how many folks have been deported. They're priority one offenders, which is basically 3 misdemeanors, or you basically killed someone. So until it becomes a major issue, they don't seem to care. And we know why this continues. Because as long as you allow people to be housed there, you're creating the incentive for more illegal immigration. This is a chicken and egg problem.
Okay, but he did say, listen, it's not I don't want to be deporting 11 million people. We're
not even deporting the 2 or 3 million criminal illegals.
Let me say something. One thing your viewers may know, and you may not know it either, is both Ford and I are from Houston. We spent a lot of time there. It's a great city. It is a dynamic city. It has an economic vitality that a lot of other cities do not have. The people in the city of Houston, who have been in control of law enforcement, do not believe generally that they should be enforcing, provisions of the federal law that are better handled, by the federal government. Nobody is saying that, police departments at the local level or mayors are encouraging murder. And
yes, they absolutely are. A great example is San Francisco and Kate Steinle. I see them out in front of the courthouse. Houston may be a different story, but understand this is going on across the country in metropolitan areas. But when I see this in San Francisco, you're not telling me that they are refusing outwardly to say that they're enforcing the law. And guess what? It doesn't really matter.
You can argue about whether or not certain things are the responsibility of the federal government or local law enforcement. However, it's not useful, in terms of having this discussion, not here today, but nationally, to talk about, mayors condoning murder. That is
mayors
not what
are condoning
anybody
murder
is doing.
for political reasons because of the demographics at the ballot box. We all know why this is occurring. That is exactly why it's occurring. Explain to me.
I love you, but that's a reckless thing
That
to
is
say.
not a reckless thing to say at all. And I do agree with you that you do need some of these people to help the police, and it should not be the police's job. But the police are taking their orders from City Hall in many of these cities, and that's why
if you talk to law enforcement and police officers, they believe that their job is to keep people safe, and they believe in many cases that federal interference with their jobs would make the city, less safe.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. We'll see in the next couple weeks how different cities handle it, different mayors handle it, and I'm sure we'll continue the discussion. Ford,
Okay.
Craig?
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Syria front and center. Investors fearful and selling. Fox on top of a world on edge. Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron recalling Parliament to discuss Syria. Warplanes reportedly spotted in Cyprus, hinting of an imminent attack on Syria. Russia and China warning against any strike on Syria. Stocks plunging. Oil surging. Gold prices soaring. As anyone worth their security salt continues meeting and weighing, is now the time the U.S. puts an end to all the talking and do something. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto. And John McCain long ago argued Syria had crossed that red line. Now signs this very hour the President of the United States agrees and is ready to act. The senator in a moment on the potential fallout if this means war. First to market watcher Scott Martin on the very real fallout for investors, even if it does not. Scott, what the heck happened today?
Well, Neil, it was not pretty, and really this has been going on now for a couple of days. The market is skittish. I mean, we all know the economy is on very shaky ground, very weak shape, and so now you're seeing, Neil, as you mentioned in the lead-in, the rising commodity prices, both on the gold, silver, and metals complex. More importantly, oil, Neil, up $3 a barrel today, near year-to-date highs. That takes a lot of money out of the consumer's pockets. Just a few cent rise at the pump can take billions with a B out of the U.S. economy.
But you know, as you often remind me, Scott, oil is traded like a commodity. It's not based on supply and demand, more like fear and greed. And so if the perception is that we could see a disruption in oil supplies out of the Middle East, that's all these guys need. Are they, and do you think they are, overreacting?
I don't. I think the perception is real, and we all know the administration, Neil, loves to blame the speculators, i.e. the traders, on driving the price up. But as you noted, they also drive it down. Listen, I think oil is definitely going up here over the next few weeks. On a daily basis, sure, it could be overdone. And it's not so much supply, like you said. It's a lot of the Syrian neighbors where a lot of the oil supply comes from. Any disruption over there. And oh, by the way, there's still some problems in Egypt near the Suez Canal. That can drive up price as well.
And we should point out the Suez Canal is where a lot of that Brent crude traverses to get to Europe. But there is a direct correlation with oil prices here if they just rise in tandem, right?
100%. And Neil, although the U.S. economy and the U.S. market as itself has started to be self-reliant in the sense that we're exporting more oil than we ever have, and certainly we're more reliable on some of the oil that we produce here with the fracking and the natural gas and so forth, the reality is this: oil is a global commodity. It's a consumed by all, and it's definitely influenced by tensions around the world.
All right, Scott Martin, we're going to continue watching it closely. Thank you, my friend. All right, to John McCain on what is next. The senator joins us out of Washington. Senator, what do you make of this and whether the markets are overreacting to this? What do you think?
Neil, I'm not sure. I know that markets are very volatile in times of crisis. I know that the likelihood of any Egyptian government shutting off the Suez Canal are remote. I went through the Suez Canal on the USS Forrestal when Nasser was running Egypt. So, but I can't, honestly, I can't predict the markets. I do know that this is extreme volatility throughout the Middle East, but it's not short-term, it's long-term. The conflict in Syria is spreading. Obviously, the unrest in Egypt is serious, but Lebanon is destabilized. Iraq is unraveling. They've had more bombings and killings in the last month than they had since 2008. The whole region is in a state of unrest, and that's because there is no policy and no strategy there in the Middle East.
What do you think happens if we get involved in Syria, even through missile strikes? And China and Russia have already said, bad idea. Does this escalate?
I don't think so, because I don't think Russia or China will act in any way any more than they are. They're vetoing resolutions in the UN, but most importantly, the Russians are pouring weapons into Syria for Bashar Assad to massacre people. Look, I think it's obvious now. It's media reports, not any briefing that I got, but media reports that on Thursday they're going to launch attacks and they're going to last for 3 days. That's what's being reported in the media. The question is, will those attacks just be a retaliation and Bashar basically goes on as normal, or will those attacks degrade his capabilities, particularly his air capabilities, which you could do easily with standoff weaponry, and start getting the weapons that people need, General Idris and his people need, in order to reverse the momentum on the battlefield? If it's not that, then it's simply, frankly, it'll lead to a reduction in United States credibility in the region. But if we do it right and reverse the momentum here, I think that it could really have an effect in the eventual overthrow of a person who is clearly now a war criminal by using these weapons of mass destruction. And finally, we should not have been surprised. He's used them before. And he will use them again if he thinks it's necessary to remain in power.
So I take it, Senator, you dismiss Assad's claims that these are the rebels